Good things happen in very queer ways sometimes. And so it happened with Hansel and Gretel. Hansel and Gretel lived with their mother and father many, many years ago in a far-off land on the edge of a large, thick forest. They lived there because their father was a woodcutter, and it was handy for them to live near the big trees. But though he worked very hard cutting wood, there came a time when no one wanted the wood he cut, because no one had enough money to pay for it. Times had become hard. And then, to make matters worse, a famine came upon the land, and many people were starving. The poor woodcutter was no exception. He was scarcely able to provide his family with their daily bread, and this worried him greatly, of course. One evening, after the woodcutter and his wife had tucked their children into their beds and said good night to them, they sat down in the next room to talk. They were sure the children were asleep, but actually Hansel and Gretel had slipped out of their beds, tiptoed to the door, and were listening to their parents. They heard their father say,
"Wife, what will become of us? We have nothing, no money, no food, and only enough rye meal left to bake a few more loaves of bread. After that, I don't know."
I know, dear husband, but we must have faith and keep working. We cannot give up.
It's good to be hopeful, dear wife, but I'm almost without hope any longer. I look at our children and I watch them grow thin and pale before our eyes, and you, wasting away. I want so much to do things for you, but I don't know what to do. I just don't know what to do anymore.
In their bedroom, Hansel and Gretel had heard every word their parents had said, and Gretel began to sob softly.
Oh, Hansel, what are we going to do?
Gretel, don't cry. I have an idea. Go to sleep now and don't worry.
What's your idea?
I'll tell you in the morning. Go to sleep now.
The following morning, at the break of day, Hansel woke up and awakened his sister. He motioned her to be quiet as they dressed. Then they tiptoed past their sleeping parents. From the cupboard, Hansel took 2 baskets and 2 crusts of bread. Then quickly and quietly they opened the door and slipped out into the fresh, clean-smelling morning air. Gretel said,
"Now, Hansel, tell me your idea. You said you would."
All right, this is it, Gretel. We're going into the forest to gather wild strawberries.
Strawberries?
Uh-huh.
How do you know there are strawberries in the forest?
Because I had a dream, and in my dream I saw a whole patch of red wild strawberries. I saw right where they are, just as clear and real.
Hansel, dreams aren't real.
Well, this one was. Come on.
You know we're not allowed to go into the forest alone.
Gretel, don't you see? We've got to get the strawberries so that we can all eat. Father is so worried he's sick. If we can find the strawberries, he and Mother won't worry anymore. Sometimes you have to do things.
But it's wrong.
Sometimes right is wrong and wrong is right.
I don't understand you, Hansel.
You understand that we don't want Mother and Father to worry, don't you?
Yes.
And that's right, isn't it?
Yes.
Then come on, let's go find the strawberries.
So off into the forest went Hansel and Gretel hand in hand. As they walked along, they shared one of the crusts of bread for their breakfast, and the other crust Hansel began to break into tiny crumbs, and he dropped them along the way. They showed white as snowflakes against the mossy green of the earth. Gretel asked,
Hansel, why are you dropping those precious breadcrumbs? That's our lunch.
I'm making a path with them so that we can find our way out of the forest when it's time to go home.
Oh, Hansel, you're so clever.
Well, you have to use your head sometimes. Look how thick the trees are becoming. Let's hurry. We have a long walk.
So Hansel and Gretel made their way deep into the dark forest toward the place where Hansel had dreamed the strawberry patch was. And all along the way, Hansel dropped a path of white breadcrumbs. They walked and they walked until they came to a tremendous oak tree. It was as big around as a house, and as they walked around it, they came to a clearing. There, against a background of shiny green leaves, were millions of bright red spots before their eyes. As they moved closer, they saw that every spot was a juicy red strawberry, growing wild and beautiful deep in the great forest. Hansel and Gretel looked in wonder at the sight, and then quickly they fell to their knees and began to gather them, putting them in the baskets they had brought from home. Soon Gretel said,
Hansel, I've filled up my basket, my apron, and all my pockets. I have nowhere left to put them.
I too have picked all I can carry. We'll have to come again. It's almost sundown, and Mother and Father will be worried. Come on, let's hurry and follow the path of our breadcrumbs home.
So Hansel and Gretel started for home, carrying their baskets full of wild strawberries and carefully following the trail of breadcrumbs. They moved quickly through the maze of the forest. It was like jumping from brick to brick on the cobblestone streets in their village. Gretel said,
Oh, Hansel, what fun it is to follow the way of the crumbs.
Yes, but some of them have blown away. Every now and then I lose the path. Right now I can't see any crumbs at all. Can you, Gretel?
Yes, I think so. Over here. Oh, no. It's only a white pebble. Perhaps over there. Do you see any, Hansel?
No, these are only sunbeams. They're gone, Gretel. They're all gone. Who could have taken them?
Look, Hansel.
What? Where?
Up there in the sky.
Birds! With crumbs in their beaks.
They've eaten up all our crumbs.
They've eaten up our way home.
Hansel, what are we going to do?
I think we're pretty close to home anyway, Gretel. Don't worry. I'll get us out of this old forest all right. I got us in here, didn't I?
Yes, but the sun is going down, and soon it will be dark. I'm getting scared, Hansel.
There's no reason to get scared. Come on, let's sit down for a minute under this tree and think. All we have to do is use our heads.
Hansel and Gretel sat for a while, trying to figure a way out of the forest. In the meanwhile, the sun was sinking far below the tall trees, and a cold breeze was beginning to blow around them. They got up and began to walk again. Hansel was sure they were heading in the direction of home, but wherever they turned, they met another clump of trees. The night animals were coming out now, and their chatter and rustling through the leaves was a frightening sound. Black loomed the giant pine trees. Ghostly gleamed the little white birches. The children walked very close together, their arms around each other, until finally they were exhausted and could walk no more. They dropped together under a tall sycamore tree and fell fast asleep. By and by, a bird twittered in the trees. The sun came streaking through the leaves. It was morning. The children woke up and ate some of the strawberries for their breakfast, and then they started to walk again, trying to find their way out of the great forest. But even in the daylight, they knew they were fenced in by the trees, and there seemed to be no way out. At noontime, they sat down to rest. All at once, their eyes were caught by the sight of a beautiful bird on the branch of a nearby tree. Hansel said,
Look, Gretel, it's a snowbird.
How beautiful it is.
It's flying around us.
It keeps fluttering its wings, as though it wants to speak to us.
It is speaking to us. It's telling us to follow it. Come on, let's see where it leads us.
The two lost children followed the beautiful bird until they stepped into a little glade. And lo, there it stood before them, the prettiest little house they had ever seen. The bird settled itself on the roof, and the children stood still in amazement. The little house was made all of frosted cake. Its roof was of tarts and cookies, and its windows of transparent sugar. Around it stood a fence of life-sized gingerbread girls and boys. The children couldn't wait to take a taste. They ran to the house, and Hansel helped himself to a cookie from the roof, while Gretel nibbled on a good-sized piece of window pane. She asked,
How's your shingle, Hansel?
delicious. How's your window pane?
Wonderful. I can't get enough of it. I think I'll have a piece of the candy door now.
And I'll have a piece of this chocolate windowsill. Oh, Gretel, did you ever see such a house?
And while the hungry children ate away at the house, suddenly they heard a sweet, soft voice come from inside.
Eat and nibble, gnaw and munch. Who eats my little house for lunch?
What was that, Hansel?
Oh, only the breeze, Gretel, blowing through the trees. Hand me one of those window panes.
Eat and nibble, gnaw and munch. Who eats my little house for lunch?
That wasn't the breeze, Hansel. Look.
Indeed, it was not the breeze. The children backed away from the house in fright as they watched the door open, and out of the sugary-pugary cottage came an ugly old witch. Her face was full of wrinkles, and her sharp nose bent all the way down to her hairy chin. She had only 3 teeth, 1 on top and 2 beneath, and they were long and pointed and yellow. But when she spoke, her voice was sweet and soft. She said,
Ah, my little darlings. Who brought you here? Now don't run away. Come in and stay with me. I'll take good care of you. You'll have a sweet time, I assure you. Come inside and see what lovely sweetmeats I have for you. Come along, don't be afraid, Sugar Plum and Sugar Dolly.
and so the children were lured into the old witch's house. Oh, she fed them very well, pancakes and sugar, syrup and honey, and soon Hansel and Gretel were so greedily stuffing themselves that they forgot all about being on guard against the old witch. After dinner, she showed them 2 little white beds, and as she tucked them in, she said,
Oh, you little darlings, you're so sweet, and I love you so much I could just eat you up.
And after the children were asleep, the old witch looked at them and said,
What juicy little morsels. I mean mortals. They'll make such beautiful little gingerbread children.
Ah, and now you see that this old syrup and honey witch lured children with sweetmeats to her sugar cottage. Then she popped them into the oven and turned them to gingerbread. Well, when morning came, all the syrup and honey had melted away from the old witch. While Hansel was still sleeping, she grabbed him right out of bed with one bony hand and carried him wriggling and squirming to a chicken coop behind her house, and there she locked him up and left him while Hansel was shrieking,
Let me out! Let me out!
But the old witch paid no heed. She went back into the sleeping Gretel and shook her awake.
You get up, little lazy bones. Get up at once. Come along. Now you go and fetch some water, and we'll cook some nice food for your brother. We're going to fatten him up so that I can have a nice, fat little gingerbread man.
Hansel? A gingerbread man?
Yes, indeed.
Oh, where is he? Hansel, where are you?
You come back here and do as I say. Come back here, or you'll be a gingerbread girl before you can say Philip and Jubilee.
Well, Gretel had no choice but to do as the old witch commanded. Every day she cooked large meals for Hansel to fatten him up. And every day the old witch would go to the chicken coop and say,
Put your finger out so that I can see how fat you are.
But as you know, Hansel was clever, and instead of poking out his finger, he put out an old dried-up bone. And the old witch, whose eyes were not very good, felt the bone and said,
No, you're still too thin and too bony. We'll have to fatten you up some more. Girl, fetch some water and get some supper cooking for your brother.
And so this went on for many, many days, until the old witch was tired of waiting for Hansel to grow fat. And one morning she said to Gretel,
Girl, come in here and set the table. Lay out on the cloth my little plate and my little knife and my little napkin to wipe my little mouth. And do it all quickly. I'm going to have a thin but delicious gingerbread boy for my breakfast.
Gretel did as she was told. Then the old witch ordered her to start the oven. And when the fire was just right, she turned to Gretel and said,
Little sweetie pie, creep into the oven and see if it's properly heated. If it is, then we'll put in our dough.
Gretel suddenly realized that the old witch planned to have a gingerbread girl as well as a boy for her breakfast, and she didn't know what to do. At that very moment, a beautiful white snowbird fluttered onto the windowsill and began to sing. He seemed to be saying,
Beware, take care, take care.
Gretel hesitated for a moment, and then she said,
I really don't know how to get into the oven.
Oh, my dear little sugar dolly, just crawl in. The opening's big enough, why, I could even do it myself.
Please show me.
Well, you just poke your head in like this, then...
Then quick as lightning, Gretel gave the old witch a shove and sent her head first sprawling into the oven. Then Gretel banged the door and bolted it and ran off to the chicken coop behind the house. In a twinkling, she set Hansel free, and then as they took each other's hands and began to run away from the cottage, suddenly they looked at the gingerbread fence around the house, and they saw those gingerbread children begin to turn pink and rosy and yawn and stretch themselves, moving their arms and legs. They had all become real children again, set free from the old witch's charms when Gretel popped her into the oven. Joyously, they all thronged around Hansel and Gretel, and then they all went into the house to peep into the oven and see what had become of their enemy. And there, lo and behold, was no witch at all, but just a huge ginger cake. But the children had no desire to eat any more sweets, so they ran out of the house. As they came out, they saw their good white bird fluttering over them, and with him this time, a whole flock of birds, hundreds of them. And then a wondrous thing happened. As all the children watched, the birds swooped down to a nest behind the chimney of the house, a nest full of pearls and rubies and precious gems. And each bird picked up a gem in its beak, swooped down to the children, and dropped them into the hands of the boys and the outstretched aprons of the girls. And guided by the beautiful snowbird, all the children followed him into the green and wooded forest, through the sunlit glades, over the carpets of thick, soft moss and sweet-smelling pine needles, until they were out of the forest, and the great white bird swooped over their heads once more, and then began to soar and disappear into the setting sun, calling out, and the children waved their goodbyes to their faithful guide, and now all of them ran in separate directions to their homes. Hansel and Gretel walked along, hand in hand. The trees and fields began to look more and more familiar now, and as they came out of a field of high grass, the oh-so-welcome sight of their father's cottage came into view, and they raced the rest of the way and burst into the house. Their father and mother took them in their arms and covered them with kisses.
Oh, Hansel Gretel, where have you been?
We gave you
Oh,
all.
my darlings, we've been so worried.
Well, it's rather a long story, Father, but we got lost in the forest.
The forest?
We went to get strawberries.
Strawberries?
So you wouldn't worry.
And we'd all have something to eat.
Oh, my poor babies.
But we found something better, Mother.
Look at all this treasure.
We shall never be hungry again.
And Hansel emptied his pockets, and Gretel poured a shower of gems from her apron onto the table, while their mother and father looked in amazement.
How beautiful.
How wonderful.
But it's even more beautiful and more wonderful to have you home. You are our most precious jewels.
How did you ever get out of the forest, Hansel and Gretel?
Oh, just by using our heads, Father. That's all.
That's all.
And they all lived happily ever after. Wouldn't you?